Hey everyone, my name is Grayson, and today I'm going to share with you one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Something that happened to me and my girlfriend Marissa just last summer in the Olympic National Forest in Washington State. Before I dive into the story, I can see that almost 80% of you didn't subscribe while watching my videos. If you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss any of my horror stories. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I absolutely love hearing from all of you around the world. Now, let me tell you what happened to us in those dark woods and why I'll never go camping in Olympic National Forest again. It was mid-July last year. Marissa and I had been planning this camping trip for months. We're both from Seattle, and we thought we knew the Pacific Northwest pretty well. Marissa had just graduated from the University of Washington with her degree in environmental science, and I was working as a software developer. We both loved the outdoors, hiking, camping, all of it. The plan was simple. 3 days, 2 nights in the deep wilderness of Olympic National Forest. We wanted to get away from everything. No cell service, no distractions, just us and nature. We had done plenty of camping before, but never this deep into the forest. Never this far from civilization. We packed our gear carefully. Our REI tent, sleeping bags rated for cold weather, plenty of food, water purification tablets, first aid kit, everything we thought we'd need. Marissa even brought her expensive camera. She was passionate about wildlife photography and hoped to capture some amazing shots of the old-growth forest. The drive from Seattle took us about 3 hours, winding through small towns and eventually onto logging roads that seemed to go on forever. The deeper we went, the more isolated we felt. Cell service had cut out about an hour before we reached our planned starting point. We parked at a small trailhead, barely marked, just a wooden post with a faded trail number. There were no other cars, no other hikers, nothing. Just us and the towering Douglas firs that seemed to stretch endlessly into the gray sky. Marissa was excited, snapping photos of everything. The moss-covered trees, the filtered sunlight, the way the forest seemed to swallow sound. I remember thinking how quiet it was, unnaturally quiet, even for a deep forest. We hiked for about 4 hours before finding what seemed like the perfect campsite, a small clearing beside a creek, surrounded by massive old-growth trees, some of them easily 8 feet in diameter. The canopy was so thick that even though it was only late afternoon, it felt like dusk in the clearing. Setting up camp was routine. We'd done it dozens of times before. Marissa gathered firewood while I set up the tent. The creek provided fresh water, and we had everything we needed. As the sun began to set, what little light filtered through the canopy started to fade. That's when we first heard it. A sound distant at first, like branches breaking, but rhythmic, too rhythmic to be natural. Marissa heard it too. She stopped mid-sentence while telling me about a rare fungus she'd spotted on one of the trees. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded. We both stood perfectly still listening. The sound came again. Crack, crack, crack. Like footsteps, but heavier than human footsteps and slower. "Probably just a deer," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "Or an elk. They're common in this area." But Marissa shook her head. "I've heard elk before. This is different. It's too deliberate." The sound stopped. The forest returned to its unnatural silence. We tried to brush it off, continued setting up camp, started a fire, cooked our dinner. But both of us kept glancing toward the tree line, toward the darkness that was rapidly consuming the forest around us. As night fell completely, the sounds returned, this time closer, much closer. And now there was something else. A low humming, almost like someone humming a tune, but not quite. It was off-key, discordant, unsettling. Marissa grabbed my arm. "Grayson, there's something out there." I tried to stay calm. "Let's just get in the tent. It's probably nothing." But as we moved toward our tent, the humming stopped, and we heard something that made our blood run cold. The sound of our own voices, coming from the darkness beyond our campfire. "Let's just get in the tent. It's probably nothing." My own voice, perfectly mimicked, came floating back to us from somewhere in the trees. Marissa's face went white. "That's not possible." Then her voice echoed back. "Grayson, There's something out there. We scrambled into the tent, zipping it shut as quickly as possible. Our hands were shaking. Marissa was trying to control her breathing. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. For the next hour, we sat in complete silence, listening. The voice mimicking continued, but now it was mixing our words, creating sentences we'd never said. Marissa, help me. In my voice. It's in the tent. In her voice. Don't leave me here. In my voice again. Each phrase was perfectly accurate down to our accents, our inflections, but the words were wrong, combinations we'd never spoken. Around midnight, everything went silent. Completely silent. No wind, no creek, no insects, nothing. It was like the entire forest was holding its breath. That's when Marissa whispered, "Look at the tent wall." I followed her gaze, and my heart nearly stopped. There was a shadow on the tent wall, cast by our small LED lantern. But it wasn't the shadow of either of us. It was tall, impossibly tall, with arms that were too long, hanging down past where knees should be. The shadow wasn't moving, just standing there, right outside our tent. We could see it clearly, but we couldn't hear anything. No breathing, no footsteps, nothing. Marissa reached for her phone to take a picture, forgetting we had no service. As soon as she moved, the shadow disappeared, vanished instantly, as if it had never been there. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. We didn't sleep that night. We sat back to back in the tent, watching the walls, listening for any sound, any indication of what was out there. But the forest remained silent, dead silent, until just before dawn. As the first gray light began to filter through the trees, we heard the humming again. But this time it was different. This time there were multiple voices, humming in harmony, but still off-key, still wrong. When we finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent and look outside, the clearing was empty. Our fire had burned down to cold ashes. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. There were footprints around our tent, large footprints, but not quite human. They were elongated, with what looked like claw marks at the tips, and they circled our tent, over and over, dozens of times. Marissa started taking pictures immediately, documenting everything. But when she reviewed the photos on her camera, the footprints weren't there. The images showed our campsite, the tent, the cold fire pit, but no prints, nothing. "This is impossible," she said. "I can see them right there, but they're not showing up in the photos." We decided to pack up immediately, get out of there as fast as possible. But as we were breaking down the tent, Marissa made a discovery that still gives me nightmares. She found marks on the tent, tiny punctures in the fabric, arranged in patterns, almost like letters or symbols. When she showed them to me, I could swear they looked like stick figures, crude drawings of people. But the fabric hadn't been there the night before when we set up. "Grayson, these weren't here yesterday." I examined the marks closely. They were definitely new, and they were only on the side of the tent where we'd seen the shadow. We packed in record time, barely speaking, just focused on getting out of there. But as we were shouldering our backpacks, the humming started again, this time from all around us, like we were surrounded. Marissa grabbed my hand. "We need to go. Now." We started hiking back toward the trailhead as fast as we could, but something was wrong. The trail we'd taken in, the trail we knew we'd marked carefully, was gone. There were deer paths, game trails, but the main trail we'd followed for 4 hours the day before had simply vanished. "This doesn't make sense," Marissa said, pulling out her GPS. "According to this, we should be standing on the trail right now." But we weren't. We were standing in thick forest, surrounded by massive trees, with no clear path in any direction. The humming was getting louder, closer, and now we could hear the voice mimicking again. But this time it wasn't just our voices. There were other voices, people we didn't recognize, having conversations that made no sense. "Have you seen my daughter?" A woman's voice. "The ranger station is closed." A man's voice. "They never found the bodies." Another woman. "Turn around. Turn around." A child's voice. Marissa was starting to panic. "Grayson, what is happening? This isn't real. This can't be real." I try to stay calm, to think logically. Let's just pick a direction. Head downhill. All trails eventually lead downhill. But every direction looked the same. Massive trees, thick undergrowth, and that oppressive silence when the voices stopped. It was like the forest was playing with us, confusing us deliberately. We picked what we thought was north, based on the position of the sun, and started walking. But after an hour of hiking, we found ourselves back at our campsite. The fire pit was there, the exact spot where our tent had been, even some of our footprints from that morning. "This is impossible," I said. We hiked in a straight line. Marissa was examining her GPS again. "According to this, we never left. We've been standing in the same spot for the last hour." That's when we realized we weren't dealing with something natural. Something was keeping us here. Something wanted us to stay. The voices started again, but now they were having full conversations. We could hear families talking, children playing, park rangers giving safety briefings, all coming from different directions in the forest, overlapping, creating a cacophony of human sounds that should have been comforting, but instead was terrifying, because we could see the forest, and it was empty, completely empty. "Marissa," I said, "I think we need to accept that we're not going to hike out of here normally." She looked at me, fear clear in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, whatever this is, it's not letting us leave. We need to figure out what it wants." As if responding to my words, all the voices stopped at once. The forest returned to that unnatural silence, and then we heard something that made our skin crawl. Our own voices, having a conversation we'd never had. "I love you, Marissa." My voice. "I want to stay here forever." Her voice. "We never have to leave." My voice. "Just the two of us always." Her voice. "We never said that." Marissa whispered. "We never had that conversation." I nodded. It's taking our voices, mixing our words, creating new conversations. The fake conversation continued. The others tried to leave. My voice. But they couldn't. Her voice. "Now they're part of the forest." My voice. "Just like we'll be." Her voice. Marissa was shaking now. "What others? What is it talking about?" That's when we noticed them, scattered throughout the forest floor, partially hidden by moss and fallen leaves, pieces of camping gear, old backpacks, torn pieces of tents, a hiking boot, a water bottle with a name written in faded marker. "Lisa Chun, if found please return." The bottle read. Marissa photographed everything. But again, when she reviewed the images, they showed nothing. Just forest floor, moss, leaves, but no gear, no evidence. "Why can I see these things, but the camera can't?" she asked. I was starting to understand. I think we're seeing what happened to previous campers, people who got lost in here, who never made it out. As if confirming my theory, we began to see more. A sleeping bag hanging from a high branch, covered in moss, like it had been there for years. A camp stove half buried, with initials carved into the metal. JM plus SR 2019. The voices were telling us stories now. Stories of other campers, other couples, families, who had come to Olympic National Forest and never left. "We came here for our anniversary." A woman's voice we didn't recognize. It was supposed to be romantic. A man's voice. "But the forest, it calls to you." The woman again. "It makes you want to stay." The man. "Forever." Both voices in unison. Marissa grabbed my hand. "Grayson, I'm starting to feel it too." "Feel what?" Like maybe we should stay. It's beautiful here, peaceful, away from all the stress of the city." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were glazed, distant, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Marissa snapped out of it. "That's not you talking. That's whatever this thing is." She blinked, focused on me. "You're right. God, for a second there. I actually wanted to stay. How is that possible?" The forest was affecting us, getting into our heads, making us want things we wouldn't normally want. I realized this was how it worked. It didn't trap people physically. It trapped them mentally, made them want to stay, until they became part of it. "We need to move," I said. "Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't listen to the voices." We started walking again, this time more determined, but the forest fought us. The terrain seemed to shift. Paths that had been clear moments before became blocked by fallen trees. Clearings we could see ahead of us disappeared when we got close. The voices followed us, growing louder, more insistent. "Why do you want to leave?" Marissa's voice, but not Marissa. Don't you love me? My voice, but not me. We could be happy here. Both our voices. Together forever. Chorus of voices, dozens of them. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed distorted in that place. We found more evidence of previous campers. A tent, still set up, but covered in moss and small plants, like it had been there for decades. Inside, we found personal items, photos, journals, all too withered to read. Marissa was fighting the forest's influence, but I could see it was getting stronger. Grayson, maybe we should rest, just for a few minutes. No, I said firmly. We keep moving, no matter what. That's when we saw them, figures in the distance, moving between the trees. At first, I thought there were other hikers, other people lost like us, but as they got closer, I realized something was wrong. They moved strangely, too fluid, like they were floating just above the ground. And their faces, God, their faces were wrong. Features that didn't quite line up, eyes that reflected light like an animal's, smiles that were too wide. Marissa, don't look at them. But she was already staring. They looked familiar, like people I've seen before, but different. The figures began calling to us, using voices we recognized. Grayson, Marissa. It sounded like my college roommate Elias. We've been looking for you. Marissa's sister Talia's voice. Come this way. We found the trail. Our friend Brooke's voice. But we knew it was impossible. None of these people were supposed to be here. None of them even knew where we'd gone camping. It's mimicking people we know, I realized, using their voices to lure us. The figures were getting closer, and now we could see more details that made our skin crawl. Their clothes were wrong, mixtures of different styles and eras, like they were wearing the belongings of everyone who'd ever been lost in this forest. One figure wore a modern REI jacket, but beneath it was what looked like a flannel shirt from the 1980s, and old work boots that were clearly decades old. Another had a smartphone in one hand, but was wearing a backpack that looked like it was from the 1960s. They're wearing the gear of previous campers, Marissa whispered. Everyone who got lost here. The realization hit us both at the same time. These weren't just mimicking voices. They were wearing the identities, the belongings, the very essence of everyone who'd been trapped in this forest. Grayson, Marissa, the voices were closer now, more urgent. Why are you running from us? We didn't answer. We just kept moving. But now the forest itself seemed to be working against us. Branches reached out to snag our clothes. Roots rose up to trip us. The ground became muddy and treacherous. Behind us, we could hear more voices joining the chorus. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all calling our names, all claiming to be people we knew. It's your mother, Marissa. But Marissa's mother had died 2 years ago. It's your brother, Grayson. But I was an only child. We miss you. A chorus of impossible voices. The psychological pressure was intense. Part of me, a growing part, wanted to turn around, wanted to go to them, wanted to believe they were real. The forest was working on us, wearing down our resistance. Grayson, Marissa said, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. Maybe we should go back. Maybe they really are here to help. I grabbed her shoulders, looked into her eyes. Marissa, listen to me. Your mother is dead. You know that. Whatever is using her voice, it's not her. She blinked, shook her head. You're right. God, what is this place doing to us? We kept moving, but the figures were catching up. We could see them more clearly now, and what we saw defied explanation. They looked like people we knew, but wrong, like someone had tried to recreate human faces from memory, but gotten the details slightly off. The Elias figure had his hair, his build, but his eyes were too far apart, and his smile extended too far up his cheeks. The Talia figure had Marissa's sister's general appearance, but her skin had a waxy quality, like a mannequin. Don't look at them directly, I warned Marissa. I think that makes it worse. But it was hard not to look. They were calling to us constantly now, pleading, begging us to come back, using intimate details about our lives, things only our real friends and family would know. Remember when we went to that concert in Portland? The Elias figure called. You spilled beer on that girl's shoes. It was true. A specific memory from years ago. How could it know that? Remember your first pet? Whiskers. The Talia figure called to Marissa. You cried for days when he died. Marissa stumbled. How does it know about Whiskers? I never told anyone that story except family, I finished. It's reading our memories somehow, taking our thoughts. The forest was definitely reading our minds, using our own memories against us. And the longer we stayed, the more it learned, the more convincing the illusions became. We had been hiking for hours, or what felt like hours. Time was still distorted. The sky above the canopy should have been getting lighter. Dawn should have been approaching, but it remained the same dim twilight. Grayson, Marissa said, I don't think time works normally here. She was right. We'd been moving for what felt like an entire night, but the light never changed. It was like we were stuck in a single moment, suspended in eternal dusk. The figures behind us were multiplying. Now, there were dozens, all wearing the faces and voices of people from our lives. Teachers from elementary school, co-workers, distant relatives. The forest was going deeper into our memories, pulling out people we'd almost forgotten. Remember me? I'm your third-grade teacher, MRS Johnson. But MRS Johnson had been elderly when I was 8. She'd probably died years ago. I'm your cousin David from Canada, using Marissa's cousin's voice, but David lived in Toronto and had never been camping in his life. The psychological assault was relentless. Every few minutes, another familiar voice, another impossible figure, another memory being used against us. But we kept moving. We had to, because stopping meant giving in, and giving in meant becoming like them, becoming part of the forest collection. That's when Marissa noticed something. Grayson, look at the trees. I looked up and saw something that made my blood run cold. Carved into the bark of the massive Douglas firs, hundreds of names, scratched and carved at different heights, different levels of weathering. Some looked fresh, others were nearly grown over with bark. Lisa Chin 2019, Michael Torres 2015, the Davidson family 2007, Jenny and Mark Forever 1993. Hundreds of names, couples, families, individual hikers, all who had come to Olympic National Forest and never left. Oh God, Marissa whispered. This has been happening for decades. Some of the carvings were so old, they were barely visible, worn smooth by weather and time. We were looking at the names of people who had been lost in this forest for 30, 40, maybe 50 years. The figures behind us had stopped calling. They were just following now, silently, patiently, like they knew we were getting tired, knew we couldn't keep running forever. And they were right. We were exhausted. We'd been hiking for hours without real rest. Our water was running low, and every direction looked the same. Endless trees, no landmarks, no way to orient ourselves. Marissa, I think we need to try something different. She looked at me. What do you mean? I think the forest wants something from us. Some kind of acknowledgement or tribute. We need to figure out what. It sounded crazy even as I said it, but nothing rational was working. We couldn't navigate out, couldn't contact help, couldn't even photograph evidence of what was happening. Marissa considered this. You think we need to communicate with it? Maybe. It's been using our voices, our memories. Maybe it wants to tell us something. We stopped walking, turned around to face the figures that had been following us. They stopped too, maintaining distance, but clearly watching, waiting. What do you want? I called out to the forest, feeling ridiculous. The response was immediate. Every voice speaking at once. Dozens of different people, all saying the same thing. Stay, stay, stay. The word echoed through the forest, repeated by every figure, every voice, creating a sound that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Why? Marissa called back. Why do you want us to stay? This time the response was different, sadder, more human. Lonely. A child's voice. So lonely. An elderly woman. Been alone so long. A man. Need company. Everyone speaking together. I was beginning to understand. This wasn't malevolent, not exactly. It was lonely. Desperately lonely. It had been collecting people for decades, trying to create a community of family. But the people it collected weren't really alive anymore. They were echoes, shadows, memories preserved, but not living. We can't stay. I said gently. We have lives, people who will miss us. The forest responded with anger. Trees began to sway without wind. The ground beneath our feet shifted, and the voices became harsh, accusatory. Everyone says that. Angry voices. Everyone leaves. Bitter voices. No one stays. Hurt voices. And no one ever stays. A roar of sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The figures began moving toward us again, faster now, more aggressively. Their faces were changing, becoming less human, more desperate, more hungry. We ran, crashed through the undergrowth, branches tearing at our clothes, roots trying to trip us. But this time felt different. This time I could sense a direction, a pull, like the forest's grip was weakening. Behind us, the voices were screaming now, no longer trying to mimic or seduce, just raw emotion, rage and loneliness and desperate need. Don't leave, US. Come back. You can't leave. No one leaves, but we could feel it. The forest's power was fading, like we'd broken some kind of spell by refusing its offer, by choosing to leave instead of stay. The trees began to thin. The oppressive canopy opened up, and suddenly, miraculously, we could see actual sunlight, real sunlight, streaming through normal gaps in normal trees. There, Marissa pointed, the trail, and there it was, the actual trail we'd coming on, clear as day, marked with the same faded trail markers we'd seen the day before. We ran, not looking back, not slowing down, until we reached our car, still parked at the trailhead, covered in dew like it had been sitting there overnight, which it had, but somehow it felt like we'd been gone for days. Marissa fumbled with the keys. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get them in the ignition. But finally, the engine started, and we drove. Fast, not speaking, just focused on getting as far away from Olympic National Forest as possible. It wasn't until we were back in Seattle, back in our apartment, back in a normal world, that we really processed what had happened. Marissa tried to upload the photos from her camera, the ones that should have shown the footprints, the carved names, the scattered camping gear. But every single photo was normal, just trees and forest. Nothing unusual, nothing that would prove our story. It's like it never happened, she said, but we both knew it had. We could still hear those voices sometimes, late at night, when the city was quiet, faint echoes of the forest calling to us, trying to draw us back. Marissa threw away her expensive camera, said she never wanted to take another photo. I understood. Every image reminded her of what we couldn't capture, what we couldn't prove. We've never gone camping again, never even talked about it, until now, until I decided to share this story with you. I've done research since then, looked into missing persons cases in the Olympic National Forest, and what I found made everything worse. There have been dozens of unexplained disappearances over the years. Experienced hikers, families, couples just like us, people who went into the forest and simply vanished. No bodies found, no real clues, just empty campsites and abandoned cars. Lisa Chung, the name on the water bottle we found. She was reported missing in 2019, last seen heading into Olympic National Forest alone. Never found. Michael Torres disappeared in 2015 with his girlfriend. Their car was found at a trailhead. Their campsite was discovered, but they were gone. The Davidson family, parents and 2 young children, vanished in 2007. Massive search operation. Hundreds of volunteers. Nothing. All the names we saw carved in those trees. They correspond to real missing persons cases. Real people who walked into that forest and never came out. But here's the thing that really disturbs me. In every case, the missing people's families reported the same thing. In the days before they disappeared, the missing persons had talked about feeling drawn to Olympic National Forest, like something was calling to them, pulling them there. Marissa and I, we never felt that pull before we went. We chose that location randomly, or so we thought. But now I wonder, did we really choose it? Or did something choose us? Since our experience, I've had dreams about that forest. Dreams where I'm back in that clearing, where the voices are calling to me, where Marissa is telling me we should stay, that we'd be happy there forever. Sometimes I wake up and find myself researching camping gear online, looking at trails in Olympic National Forest, planning trips I would never actually take. It's like part of me is still there, still connected to that place. Marissa moved to California 6 months after our trip, said she needed to get further away. That Seattle was too close. She still calls sometimes, but she sounds different, distant, like she's fighting the same pull I am. I've talked to other people, hikers, park rangers. Most of them just shake their heads, tell me it was stress, lack of sleep, altitude sickness, normal explanations for abnormal experiences. But a very few, they get a look in their eyes, like they know something, like they've heard similar stories before. But they won't talk about it. Not officially. Not on the record. One old ranger, retired now. He pulled me aside after I told him about our experience. He said there are places in Olympic National Forest that even the rangers avoid. Areas that are marked on maps, but never patrolled. Regions where search and rescue operations are called off unusually quickly. Some places, he told me, aren't meant for people. But sometimes they develop a taste for us anyway. He wouldn't say more. Just gave me a knowing look and walked away. I've tried to move on. Tried to convince myself it was all in our heads, mass hallucination brought on by stress and isolation. But I can't explain the missing persons cases. Can't explain how we knew names that corresponded to real disappearances. Can't explain the pull I still feel. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the humming. Faint, like it's coming from very far away. And I know it's calling me back. Calling me home. The forest is patient. It's been there for thousands of years, collecting people, adding to its community of shadows and echoes. And it knows that eventually, everyone who's been touched by it, everyone who's heard its call, will return. I see it now, in people's eyes sometimes. That distant look, that dreamy expression, like they're listening to something the rest of US can't hear. And I wonder, how many people in Seattle and Pacific Northwest are fighting the same pull I am? How many people have had experiences like ours, but never talked about them, never shared their stories, because who would believe them? The forest is still there, still waiting, still calling. And every day, more people go missing in our national forests, vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only empty campsites and grieving families. Marissa texted me last week. First time in months. All she said was, I can hear it calling. And then nothing. She won't answer my calls. Her roommate says she's been researching camping gear, planning a trip back to Washington. I'm terrified she's going to go back. Terrified the forest will finally get what it wants. And I'm terrified that someday, despite everything I know, despite everything that happened, I'll go back too. Because that's how it works. It plants itself in your mind, grows there, whispers to you, until the pull becomes too strong to resist. Until staying away becomes more painful than going back. If you ever go camping in Olympic National Forest or any deep wilderness, and you hear voices that sound familiar, voices calling your name, don't follow them. Don't engage. Don't try to investigate. Just leave. Get out as fast as you can. And don't look back. Because once the forest knows you, once it has your voice, your memories, your essence, it will never stop calling you home. And someday, when you're weak, when you're lonely, when you're missing something you can't quite name, you'll answer that call. Just like all the others did. Just like I probably will. The names carved in those trees, they're still there, waiting for new additions. And I know, with terrible certainty, that someday my name will be among them. Grayson 2025. Carved into the bark, forever part of the forest, forever part of its lonely community. I still have nightmares about those figures, wearing the faces of people I love, calling to me with voices I trust, promising me peace, promising me belonging, promising me that I'll never be alone again. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, is that sometimes, in my dreams, I say yes. Sometimes I dream that I walk back into that clearing, that I let the forest take me, that I become one of those figures, wearing someone else's clothes, using someone else's voice, calling to new victims, new friends, new family members to add to our eternal community. And in those dreams, I'm happy. That's what scares me the most. Not the horror of what we experienced, but the seductive promise of what the forest offered. A place where no one is ever really alone, where lost souls find each other, where the pain of isolation ends forever. Even now, as I tell you this story, part of me is planning the drive. 3 hours from Seattle, winding through small towns, eventually onto logging roads, to that barely marked trailhead, to that perfect campsite beside the creek, where Marissa and I could be together forever. I shake my head violently, forcing myself back to reality, back to my apartment in Seattle, back to the present moment. But the pull is getting stronger. Every day it gets a little harder to resist. I've started having conversations with the forest in my dreams, long talks with those figures, with the shadows of people who never made it out. They tell me stories about their lives before, their families, their dreams, their regrets, and they all say the same thing in the end, that being part of the forest isn't so bad, that the loneliness stops, that they've found peace in the eternal community of the lost. There's a woman named Catherine who says she's been there since 1987. She was a marine biologist, came to study the old-growth ecosystem. She tells me about the others, about James, who was a photographer from Portland, about the Martinez family, who came for a reunion, about ANA and David, who were on their honeymoon. They all described the same experience. The voices, the mimicking, the impossible geography, the figures wearing faces they knew. And they all made the same choice in the end. They chose to stay. They chose to belong. Catherine says it wasn't scary once she accepted it. She says the forest took care of her, gave her everything she needed. Purpose, community, an end to all the uncertainty and struggle of regular life. You're fighting so hard, Grayson. She tells me in these dreams. But why? What's really waiting for you out here? What's so important about your old life? And I find myself struggling to answer. My job writing code for a company that doesn't really care about me. My small apartment where I spend most evenings alone. My few friendships that feel increasingly superficial. Marissa gone to California. My family scattered across the country. What am I really fighting to preserve? The forest shows me things in these dreams. Visions of what life could be like there. No bills to pay. No deadlines to meet. No social media to check. No news to stress about. Just peace. Just community. Just the simple rhythm of days and seasons. I see myself helping newcomers. The way Catherine and the others helped guide people through their transition, teaching them that resistance only causes suffering, that acceptance brings peace. Sometimes I dream I'm already there, already part of the forest community, and I'm calling to new visitors, using the voice of someone they trust, helping the forest find new friends, new family members, and in those dreams, I feel useful. I feel needed. I feel like I belong somewhere. The research I've been doing makes it worse. Every missing person's case I read about, every family destroyed by unexplained disappearances. I think about how much pain could be prevented if people just understood what the forest was offering. Lisa Chen's mother still posts on social media every year on the anniversary of her daughter's disappearance. Still hoping for answers. Still suffering. But Lisa isn't suffering. She's part of something bigger now. Something permanent. The Davidson children would be adults now if they were still alive in the normal world, but they're preserved forever in the forest. Still young. Still together as a family. Never having to face the disappointments and heartbreaks of growing up. I've started visiting grief support groups. Not to get help, but to listen. To hear about people who are struggling with loss. People who might understand the gift the forest offers. People who might be ready to find peace. There's a woman named Helen whose husband died of cancer last year. She talks about how empty everything feels. How she goes through the motions of living, but doesn't feel alive. She would understand. She would see the beauty in what the forest provides. There's a man named Robert whose adult son was killed in a car accident. He says he dreams about conversations they'll never have. Places they'll never visit together. The forest could give them eternity. Could reunite them in a place where time doesn't work the same way. I haven't approached any of them. Not yet. But I think about it. I think about how I could help them. How the forest could help them. Marissa called me yesterday. First time in 2 months. Her voice sounded different. Clearer. More certain. I'm coming back to Seattle, she said. Marissa, don't. I know what you're thinking, but I can't fight it anymore, Grayson. I dream about it every night. I can see the clearing. I can hear the others calling. They're not scary anymore. They're welcoming. They want us to come home. It's not home, Marissa. It's not real. Isn't it, though? What's real about this life? Working jobs we don't care about. Paying rent on apartments that don't feel like home. Pretending to be happy when we're all just existing. I couldn't argue with her, because she was right about everything. The forest showed me something, Grayson. In my dreams, it showed me what happens to people who resist too long. They don't find peace. They just fade away, piece by piece, until there's nothing left. What do you mean? I mean people like us. People who've been touched by the forest, but refuse to return. We don't get to live normal lives. We just slowly disappear, lose connection to everything, everyone, until we're ghosts in our own lives. She was describing exactly how I'd been feeling, like I was becoming less real every day, like the normal world was rejecting me somehow, like I didn't quite fit anymore. I've been researching it too, she continued. People who've had encounters like ours, but managed to escape. Most of them, they don't live very long after. Accidents, suicides, mysterious illnesses. It's like the forest doesn't let go completely. It just waits. Marissa, you're scaring me. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save you. Save us both. The forest isn't our enemy, Grayson. It's our destiny. We were chosen, selected, and fighting that selection is what's killing us. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment, really looked around, tried to remember the last time I'd felt genuinely happy here, the last time anything in my normal life had felt meaningful. I couldn't remember. My work had become mechanical, typing code without really thinking about it. My social interactions felt scripted, like I was playing a role in someone else's story. Even food didn't taste the same. Colors seemed muted. Everything felt distant. The forest dreams were becoming more vivid, more detailed, more appealing. I was spending hours each night in conversations with Catherine and the others, learning about their lives in the forest community, how they spent their days, how they helped each other, how they never felt alone or lost or uncertain. They told me about the deeper parts of the forest, areas where time moved differently, where the trees themselves were alive in ways science couldn't explain, where the boundary between individual consciousness and collective experience became blurred. It sounded peaceful, like meditation, like coming home to a place I'd never been, but somehow always known. Marissa arrived in Seattle 3 days later. I met her at the airport, and the change in her was obvious. She looked lighter somehow, like she made a decision and the weight of uncertainty had lifted. You feel it too, she said as we drove back to my apartment. The emptiness, the disconnection, like this world isn't quite real anymore. I nodded. It's getting worse. Because we're fighting what we know is true. Grayson, we don't belong here anymore. We belong there, with them, with our real family. We spent that evening researching together, looking deeper into the missing persons cases, the patterns, the common elements, and what we found was a community, dozens of people over the decades who had shared similar experiences. Most of them eventually returned to the forest. There were blog posts, social media accounts, people documenting their struggles with the pull, their growing disconnection from normal life, their eventual acceptance of where they truly belonged. One blog, written by a man named Derek who'd had an encounter in 2018, documented his entire journey, from initial terror to resistance to gradual acceptance. His final post was titled Going Home. I understand now that fighting this is like fighting gravity. You can resist for a while, but eventually, you have to let go. The forest isn't taking anything from us. It's giving us everything we've ever really wanted. Community, purpose, peace, an end to the constant struggle of pretending to fit in a world that was never meant for us. His blog went silent after that post. Derek Williams was reported missing 2 days later. Last seen heading into Olympic National Forest. Never found. But in a way, he wasn't really missing. He was exactly where he belonged. Marissa and I made our decision that night, sitting in my apartment, looking out at the city lights, at all the people living their disconnected lives, fighting their own loneliness, their own sense of not belonging. We could try to warn them, try to help them understand, but most people aren't ready. Most people are too attached to their illusions of normal life, too afraid of what lies beyond the boundaries of accepted reality. We spent the next week preparing, not like we were going camping, like we were going home. We gave away most of our possessions, canceled our leases, quit our jobs, told our families we were taking an extended trip, exploring the Pacific Northwest. It felt right. Every step felt like we were moving towards something instead of away from it, like we were finally aligned with our true purpose. The drive back to Olympic National Forest was different this time. No anxiety, no fear, just anticipation, like children going to visit beloved grandparents. The forest welcomed us. We could feel it as soon as we crossed the boundary. The air itself felt different, charged with recognition, with joy. The trail was clear this time, obvious, leading us directly to the clearing where everything had started. Our clearing, our home. The community was waiting for us. Catherine was there, smiling, along with dozens of others, people from different eras, different backgrounds, all united by their shared experience, their shared choice. "Welcome home," Catherine said, and her voice was warm, real, not the mimicking we'd heard before. "We've been waiting for you." Marissa took my hand. "Are you ready?" I looked around the clearing, at the faces of people who had found peace, who had found belonging, who had chosen something beyond the empty struggle of normal existence. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." The transition was gentle, like falling asleep, like letting go of a breath you'd been holding for too long. The forest didn't take anything from us. It simply revealed what we really were, what we'd always been, part of something larger, something eternal, something that understood the deep human need for true community, for genuine connection, for a place where you never have to pretend to be someone you're not. Now we help others, guide them through their own journeys, help them understand that the fear they feel is just the ego resisting transformation, that what waits on the other side is everything they've ever really wanted. We call to the lonely ones, the lost ones, the ones who feel disconnected from their own lives. We use voices they trust, show them faces they love, because the forest knows. The forest always knows who's ready, who's searching for something more. Some resist longer than others. Some fight for months or years. But eventually, they all come home. Because once you've been touched by the forest, once you've seen what lies beyond the illusion of separation, you can never really be satisfied with anything less. The carved names on the trees aren't memorials. They're welcomes. Celebrations of people who found the courage to choose authenticity over pretense. Community over isolation, eternity over the brief, meaningless struggle of normal human existence. And soon, very soon, there will be 2 new names carved into the bark. Grayson and Marissa 2025. Finally home. The forest is patient, but it's also growing, expanding its reach, its influence. More people every year feel the call. More people recognize the emptiness of their disconnected lives. More people are ready to find their true family. We're not the last. We're just the beginning. If you're watching this, if you've made this far in my story, ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly connected to another person? When was the last time you felt like you belonged somewhere completely? When was the last time you experienced genuine peace? The forest knows your answer, and it's waiting, patiently, lovingly, for you to make the same choice we did, the choice to come home. The voices are calling now. Can you hear them? They're calling your name, using voices you trust, promising you everything you've ever really wanted. Don't fight it too long. Fighting only causes suffering. Welcome to the community. Welcome to the family. Welcome home. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this story, though I know some of you might find it disturbing. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Did it remind you of any experiences you've had in the wilderness? Have you ever felt like you were being watched while camping? Also, let me know what topics you want to cover in future videos. I'm always looking for new horror stories to share. Real experiences, urban legends, mysterious disappearances. Whatever keeps you up at night. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell. Give this video a thumbs up if it gave you chills. And remember, the wilderness is full of mysteries we're only beginning to understand. Comment below and tell me, what's the most frightening experience you've ever had in nature? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your stories. Some of you have been asking about Marissa, whether she's really okay, whether this story is true. I can't answer those questions directly, but I will say this. Sometimes the most important truths can't be proven. They can only be experienced. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, if you ever hear voices calling your name in the deep woods, maybe, just maybe, you should listen. Because home might be closer than you think. But even now, even after everything I've told you, I know this story isn't really over. Because the forest, it doesn't let go that easily. The first signs. At first, it was small things. The humming faint, almost like a vibration in the air. It followed me everywhere, the grocery store, the library, even the middle of crowded streets. Most people didn't notice, but I did. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something alive, like something waiting. Then came the shadows. Not bold, not obvious. Just shapes that didn't belong. Too tall to be normal people. Arms dangling too far. Faces hidden, but always turned toward me. I'd see them under flickering streetlights, in reflections on subway windows, in the gaps between buildings when the sun was setting. And whenever I turned to look directly, they'd be gone, like they'd never been there at all. But I know better now. They're not gone. They're waiting, watching me from the edges, patient, because they already know how this ends. The denial phase. I tried to push it away, told myself I was imagining things. Stress, sleep deprivation, trauma from what happened in Olympic National Forest. But the problem with lying to yourself is that the truth always finds a way back in. I made appointments with therapists, 3 different ones. Each one diagnosed me with PTSD, prescribed medication, scheduled weekly sessions. For 2 months, I tried to convince myself they were right, that the camping trip had simply broken something in my mind, that Marissa and the others had died in some mundane accident I'd repressed, that my brain was manufacturing supernatural explanations to cope with survivor's guilt. The pills made everything fuzzy, distant, but they couldn't stop the humming. If anything, in the medicated haze, it became clearer, like static clearing from a radio. The voices underneath became more distinct, more insistent. Dr. Rodriguez, my 3rd therapist, she was kind, patient. She had certificates on her wall and soft lighting in her office. She spoke in measured tones about intrusive thoughts and dissociation. But during our 5th session, something changed. I was describing the shadows I'd been seeing, and she nodded, took notes, asked follow-up questions. Standard procedure. But then she looked up from her notepad, and her eyes, they weren't quite right. Too dark, too deep, like looking into still water at night. "Tell me about the humming, Grayson," she said, but her voice, it had an echo, like it was coming from somewhere far away. I blinked, shook my head. When I looked again, she was normal. Professional smile, concerned expression. "Are you all right?" she asked. I left that day and never went back, because I realized the forest wasn't just in my head. It was spreading, following me, touching the people around me. Hashtag the discovery. And the truth is, this isn't just inside my head anymore. It's everywhere. I found an online forum, hidden private, the kind of place you only stumble across if you're already searching for the impossible. The URL was buried in the comment section of a missing persons article. Just a string of random characters that most people would ignore. But something made me click it. Something guided my finger to that link. The forum was called The Frequency. And there were others, dozens of them, people who described the same humming, the same voices, the same shadows with faces too wrong to be human. One man from Oregon wrote that he can't stand being indoors anymore. He walks miles every night, circling the edges of forests like an animal pacing the bars of a cage. He posted photos from his walks, always the same route, always at 3 a.m., in the background of every image. If you looked carefully, there were shapes between the trees, watching, A woman in Montana posted that her children say she talks in her sleep, but the words aren't English anymore. There's something else, something old. She recorded herself one night, uploaded the audio file. I played it once. Just once. Her voice, but the words. They were the same words I'd heard in the forest. The same rhythm, the same cadence, the same invitation. And then she stopped posting altogether. But her husband started, pleading for help, describing how she'd started disappearing for hours, coming home with dirt under her fingernails, pine needles in her hair, even though they lived 200 miles from the nearest forest. His last post was a photo. Empty bedroom, unmade bed, window open. She said she was going home. He wrote, "But this is home. We've lived here for 15 years. Where did she go?" No one answered him, because we all knew the pattern. I started cataloging stories, comparing details, looking for patterns, and I found them. Too many to ignore. Families disappearing from campsites in Colorado. Entire hiking groups lost in California. Hunters vanishing without a trace in Alaska. Different states, different years, but always the same signs before it happened. The humming, the voices, the dreams. Always the same. But there was more. Details the news reports never mentioned. Witnesses who saw things they couldn't explain. A park ranger in Colorado reported finding campsites that were too clean. Tents pitched perfectly. Campfires still burning. Food still warm. But no people. Like they had simply vanished mid-meal. He described feeling watched while investigating. Hearing whispers and languages he didn't recognize. Finding footprints that led into the forest, but never back out. He quit 6 months later. Moved to Phoenix. Never went camping again. A search and rescue volunteer in California described finding a hiking group's abandoned backpacks, all arranged in a perfect circle, around a fire pit that wasn't there the day before. The ground underneath was soft, almost cushioned, like moss. But there was no moss in that part of the forest. She said the area hummed when she walked through it. A low vibration that she felt in her bones, in her teeth, in her dreams for weeks afterward. That's when I realized something terrifying. It isn't just Olympic National Forest. It never was. The forest, whatever it is, it's everywhere. Every deep wilderness, every mountain, every lonely stretch of trees where the wind goes silent. They're all connected. Roots under the ground, threads under reality itself. All leading back to the same thing, the same hunger, the same call, the encounter. A few weeks ago, I experienced something I can't explain away. I was on a late train, empty, silent, the 11:47 to downtown, the same route I'd taken 100 times. But that night felt different. The air was thicker, heavier. The lights flickered more than usual. And the humming. I could hear it over the train's mechanical rhythm, weaving between the clatter of wheels on tracks. There was an old man sitting across from me. At first, I didn't pay attention. Just another commuter. Gray hair, worn coat, newspaper folded in his lap. Normal. Forgettable. But then slowly, like he was testing me, he began to hum. The same tune, the same frequency I'd been hearing for months. My blood went cold. I stared at him, willing him to stop, to prove this was coincidence. But he didn't stop. If anything, he hummed louder. And then he turned his head, and he smiled, too wide up into his cheeks, exactly like the figures in the woods. His teeth were too white, too many, and his eyes, they weren't human eyes. They were hollowed arc, like looking into an empty cave. And then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It was Marissa's voice, clear as if she were sitting next to me. "Welcome home, Grayson." I froze, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the seat, so hard my knuckles went white. The old man's lips weren't moving, but Marissa's voice continued. "We've been waiting for you. The family is incomplete without you. Come back to us." The train lurched to a stop. Emergency brakes screaming. The lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard footsteps, multiple sets, moving through the car, toward me. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, and there were people, passengers who hadn't been there before, standing in the aisles, all facing me, all smiling that impossible smile, all humming. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in sickly red. The old man stood up, walked toward the exit. "The doors will open soon," he said in Marissa's voice. "And when they do, you'll know where to go." When the doors opened, he shuffled out. I followed, but when I stepped off, he was gone, vanished, like he'd never been there. But on the platform bench, someone had carved words into the wood. Fresh cuts, still bleeding sap. "Grayson is coming home." The escalation. Since that night, everything's been getting worse. I hear knocking at my apartment door at 2 or 3 in the morning. When I check the peephole, there's no one there. But sometimes, I can hear whispering, right on the other side of the door, whispering my name, over and over. I started recording everything. Audio, video, timestamps, building evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But when I played back the recordings, there was nothing, just silence, except for my own voice, talking to empty air, responding to questions no one had asked. The technology couldn't capture them, but they were there. I knew they were there. I started marking the dates, and I noticed something. The visits, the whispers, the dreams, they're becoming more frequent, closer together, like a countdown, like they're waiting for a moment. October 1st, knocking at 3:17 a.m. October 3rd, whispers at 2:45 a.m. October 5th, knocking at 3:33 a.m. October 6th, whispers at 2:22 a.m. October 7th, both knocking and whispers at 3 a.m. October 8th, silence, but I could feel them watching through the walls. The pattern was accelerating. Soon it would be every night, then every hour, until there was no silence left, no peace, no escape. I've read enough missing persons cases now to recognize the pattern. The victims always change before they disappear. They withdraw from friends, from family. They stop going to work. They talk about hearing voices. They give away possessions. They say strange things like, "I'm going home." And then one day, they're just gone. No evidence, no bodies, no trace. Gone like they never existed at all. I called in sick to work for 2 weeks straight. Told my sister I needed space. Stopped answering texts from friends. I was becoming one of them. One of the cases. One of the statistics. But I couldn't stop myself. It felt right. It felt necessary. Like preparation. The dissolution. I think that's what's happening to me now. Because some mornings, when I wake up, things in my apartment are slightly different. The chair is in the wrong place. My phone has photos I don't remember taking. My mirror shows me standing a step behind where I actually am. Like I'm slipping. Like I'm not fully here anymore. The photos on my phone were the worst part. Images of forests I'd never visited. Campsites I'd never seen. Fire pits surrounded by figures in the darkness. And in some of them, in the background, I could see myself, standing with the others, smiling that same impossible smile. But I had no memory of being there. No memory of taking the photos. No memory of standing in those dark circles, humming with the choir of the lost. My reflection in mirrors started lagging, like there was a delay. I'd raise my hand, and a second later, my reflection would follow. Sometimes, when I turned quickly, I caught it still facing the wrong direction, still smiling when I wasn't, still moving when I had stopped. The apartment itself began to change. Walls that had been white for 3 years slowly turned green, like moss was growing underneath the paint. The floorboards creaked in rhythms that matched the humming. And sometimes, late at night, I could swear I heard running water, even though all the taps were off, like a stream flowing somewhere beneath the building, carrying whispers downstream, carrying promises. The final dream. Last night, the dream was different. I wasn't in the forest. I was in my apartment, but the walls were covered in moss. Thick, verdant breathing. The floorboards were soft, like dirt under my feet. Rich earth that gave way with each step. And the humming was so loud it shook the glass in the windows. But the windows, they didn't show the city anymore. They showed trees. Endless trees stretching to the horizon. A canopy so thick no sky was visible. When I opened the door, the hallway was gone. Instead, there was the clearing, the same fire pit, The same towering trees, the same voices, all waiting, all whispering my name. But now I could see them clearly. The figures around the fire. They weren't strangers. They were everyone who had ever heard the call. Hikers from decades past. Campers who never returned home. Children who wandered off trails. Adults who left their cars running and walked into the woods. And in the center, leading the chorus, was Marissa. But not as I remembered her. She was taller now. Her limbs moved with impossible grace. Her smile was radiant, welcoming. Her eyes held the depth of ancient forests. "Grayson, come home," she sang. And I almost stepped through. The threshold between my apartment and the clearing. Between my old life and the new. Between isolation and belonging. I felt my foot lift. Felt myself lean forward. Felt the cool forest air on my face. But something held me back. Some last thread of who I used to be. I stumbled backward, slammed the door, and woke up. But when I woke, my hand was on the doorknob of my real apartment door, and it was unlocked and open. Just a crack. Just enough to let the humming in. Hashtag the acceptance. I don't know how much longer I can fight this. Because the truth is, part of me doesn't want it anymore. The loneliness, the emptiness of this world. It's worse than the fear. Worse than the unknown. Every day is the same. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Surrounded by people who don't really see each other. Who don't really connect. Who live their entire lives as strangers. Even to themselves. But in the forest, in the clearing, there's family. There's purpose. There's a song that never ends. At least there. I wouldn't be alone. At least there. I'd belong. At least there. I'd be part of something larger than myself. Something eternal. And maybe that's the real horror. Not that the forest is hunting us, but that it's offering something we secretly crave. Connection. Belonging. An end to the endless struggle of pretending. Pretending we're happy. Pretending we're fulfilled. Pretending we don't hear the emptiness echoing in our hearts. Maybe that's why people go back. Maybe that's why they never come out again. Because once you've heard the voices, you realize they're not lies. They're promises. Promises of peace. Promises of purpose. Promises of home. Hashtag the warning. So if you're listening to this, if you ever hear the humming, if you ever see the shadows, if you ever hear a familiar voice calling your name in the dark, don't assume you're imagining it. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Because it isn't. It's real. It's waiting. And sooner or later, it's going to call you too. But here's what they don't tell you. Why I didn't understand until now. The call isn't random. It comes to those who are ready. Those who are tired. Those who are searching for something they can't name. It comes to the lost. The lonely. The ones who stand in crowded rooms and feel invisible. It comes to those who stare out windows and wonder, is this all there is? And when it does, you'll understand. You'll understand why we all eventually go home. Why none of us can resist forever. Why someday, you'll hear my voice too, welcoming you to the family, to the forest, forever. But until then, until you hear the humming in your dreams, until you see the shadows in your peripheral vision, until you feel the pull of something deeper than civilization, live, really live, connect with the people around you, find meaning in the mundane, build something worth staying for. Because once the forest calls, once you hear your name in the wind, once you see the fire burning in the clearing, there's no going back. There's only going home. And I can feel it now. The pull growing stronger. The humming getting louder. My reflection falling further behind. The moss growing thicker on the walls. Soon, very soon, I'll open that door. I'll step through. I'll take my place around the fire. And I'll add my voice to the song. The song that calls others home. The song that never ends. The song that's been playing since the first person looked at a forest and wondered what secrets it held. What family waited in the shadows. What home lay beyond the trees. Listen, can you hear it? The humming. It's starting. For you. Welcome home.